Hi, we are going to present the topic of cloning. Cloning is the process of a cell or organism getting genetically copied identically. It can be seen in nature without it being made artificially. We see it when a cell replicates asexually. Also, in prokaryotic organisms like bacteria, these organisms make duplicates of themselves by using binary fission or budding, which is a form of cloning. One case of cloning happening in history is with Dolly the sheep. On July 5, 1996, a sheep named Dolly was born. She was cloned from a cell that was taken from a mammary gland of a 6-year-old Finn Dorset sheep and an egg cell taken from a Scottish blackface sheep. The Scottish blackface sheep was the surrogate mother of Dolly. She was born with a white face, which confirmed that she was a clone since she didn't have the black face of the surrogate mother. Also, what makes Dolly special from other cases of cloning of sheep that had happened before is that it was the first time that the cloning happened from an adult cell.
And here we have some techniques of cloning. We have the somatic cell nuclear transfer. And in this technique, in which the nucleus of a somatic cell is transferred to the cytoplasm of an enucleate egg. Once inside the egg, the somatic nucleus is reprogrammed by a cytoplasmic egg with some factors to become a zygote nucleus that is a fermented egg. This egg is allowed to develop the blastocyst stage, at which point a culture of embryonic stem cells, and this can create from the inner cell mass of a blastocyst. And also we have the artificial embryo twinning. This happens when identical twins can form naturally in an early embryo splits, and two fetuses grow from the two resulting embryos. Artificial twinning occurs in the same way, but the embryo is split manually. It is made by humans. Artificial twinning is really a technological advancement of an embryo transfer, which has been used in the cattle industry for many years. These eggs are fertilized and then flushed out of the uterus of the biological mother and placed in surrogate mothers.
Now we're going to talk about the cloning applications. Reproductive cloning could allow the investigators to make copies of animals with potential benefits for the fields of medicine and agriculture. Some possible use for cloned animals is to develop new drugs and treatment strategies. The great advantage of using cloned animals to test drugs is that they are all genetically identical, which means that their responses to drugs should be uniform rather than variable, as seen in animals with different genetic material. Another application is created clones to produce populations of endangered or possibly even extinct animal species. Although some experts think that cloning can save many species that will otherwise disappear. Authors argue that cloning produces a population of genetically identical individuals that lack the genetic variability necessary to survival of the species.
Okay, now the risk of cloning. Researchers have observed some adverse health effects in the sheep and other mammals that have been cloned, and these include an increase in bird size and a variety of defects in vital organs such as the liver, brain, and heart. Other consequences include premature aging and problems with the immune system, and another potential centers to the relative age of the cloned cells, chromosomes, and as cells go through their normal rounds of division, the tips of the chromosomes, called telomeres, shrink, and that are the risks.
Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of cloning. The first study of cloning took place in 1885 when German scientist Hans Adolf Edward began researching reproduction. In 1902, he was able to create a set of twin salamanders by dividing an embryo into two separate, according to the Genetic Science Learning Center. Since then, there have been many breakouts in cloning. So, my classmate already explained the Dolly case. It was a very important case in the history of cloning because it was the first clone that was actually born from a adult cell. And so after Dolly, many more animal clones have been born, and the process is becoming more mainstream. Research has also been conducted on human cell cloning. In 2003, scientists at Oregon Health and Science University took donor DNA from an 8-month-old with a rare genetic disease and successfully cloned human embryonic stem cells from the first time. Unfortunately, the researchers didn't remove the cells to save the child. The project was to prove that mature donor cells could be used to produce new ones. The research has evolved into using stem cells for many different applications, including hair regrowth, tests, treatments from burns, and more. And so, just like a little bit more of information, cloning, it's not just on animals and humans. Cloning has actually been taking place for a very long time, and it's most usually taken place the in plants or vegetables and things that we consume a lot.
Now we're going to talk about some of the misconceptions about cloning. The first one is that cloning is a new technology, but actually cloning isn't new at all. In fact, we eat fruit from plant clones all the time in the form of bananas and graft fruits. We've been cloning plants for decades, except that we refer to it as vegetable propagation. Another one is that cloning will emerge the same age as their donors. Clones are born the same way as any other newborn animals, as babies. No one really knows what causes aging in mammals, but some scientists think that it has to do with a part of the chromosome called a telomere that functions as a kind of clock in the cell. Telomeres tend to be long at birth and shorten as the animal ages. And the other one is that cloning is against nature. How could cloning go against nature's way? It merely creates an identical version of life. No matter what, the clone is still a living, breathing being. The clone should be allowed to live as long as nature chooses, according to nature's way.
Then we have a video that sustains and explains in more detail about the different techniques or methods that cloning uses.
Disadvantages, I think making experiments with cloning can lead to scientific growth and new discoveries and ways that we can regenerate different necessary stuff, like Cecia had said in the presentation, like on things like burns and cuts, that it can help with that, but also cloning like an entire animal, like from zero to a living animal, can be hurtful, since it can lead to a lot of risk for the animal. But I think in small ways, so that we can help with healthcare, it can be useful.
Yeah, I think cloning can actually cause more good than it can cause harm, just so long as it's regulated. Like, not everyone can be cloning just as they wish. We need to have some regulations and laws about it so no one can get crazy over it and make stuff that will harm us and the planet or whatever.
Yeah, I think it should not like like any other experiment, it should not take place without like consent from the, if it's a person, obviously like from the person that it's being cloned. And which is like you said, like it has more good than it has bad on it, and I really think it can lead to really great medical advances because it can just replace a lot of things that it normally wouldn't be able to replace.
As in classes we were mentioning, it can produce more food for people that doesn't have that necessity. And also, I think that cloning is good, but only if we put limits. Like we also see in movies that they clone dinosaurs, and that's like an excess. But if we do it with enough limits and with consent, I think it will be better for humanity.
I think cloning can give us a lot of benefits, but I'm also against animal experimentation, so I'm not so agree with that. But I'm conscious that it can let us a lot of benefits, so it's okay. I'm agree with that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the things like people really like they're not that well informed, so a lot of people are like against it because they don't really know what is it about, and because I don't know, because we see movies that have that really like encourage those myths, and people just like believe what they see in the movie, and they don't really research more, and that's why it's such a big like it's confusing, and people often get confused because they don't know what is it about. And so I think we should like educate people more in the subject so they can understand that not because they saw Jurassic Park means because of cloning dinosaurs are coming back. Like we should really educate people more on the topic.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I think people, when they hear cloning, they think of um, like having me and then having another completely similar, like as me, out of nowhere. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. It can just be like, as we were saying, like it can just be food or other minimal stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to be like recreate another human being completely.
I think that I am agree with Cecia and Anna because all the movies and all that cultural pop culture uh, give us an image about cloning, like for example, Jurassic Park or Star Wars. I don't know that we think that is a bad idea, and but there are other kind of living things and plants and food that we can make and investigate that in a really complex way, you know. And I think that with a little bit of more investigation and technology, we can, well, be accomplishing that, you know.
Well, I think we can, most of us agree that cloning is a good thing if we put our limits and rules with it, and it can achieve a lot of things in the scientific field.
Yeah, and just educate people about it and really like give them information and just not let them go with the flow, just like believing everything they see in movies and or believe about cloning, because it can bring really great things like to the science world, and just letting them know that it's nothing new. We've done it for years with the food. It's just some experimenting so we can go forward with it and let it have more benefits that already has.
Y creo que eso ya sería todo.